All right, welcome back to the channel, everybody. I am Brian Lee Durfee, author of The Forgetting Moon and The Blackest Heart, both books published by Simon & Schuster's Saga Press. Today I'm going to be reviewing High White Sun by Todd Scott. Now, this is the second book in the trilogy. I don't know what the trilogy is called, but it's set in Texas, starring Sheriff Chris Cherry. I guess we'll just call it the Chris Cherry trilogy. Maybe you saw my review of The Far Empty earlier this year, where I called this my favorite novel of the year. It's still my favorite novel of the year. We're into June now. 6 months on, this book was dope, and I still stand by that. One of the best mystery novels I've ever read. Well, what did I think of the sequel, or book number 2 in the trilogy? Let's talk about it. But first, we talk about the covers, because I love graphic design and cover illustration. Again, this has a super dope title, High White Sun. I loved The Far Empty. That was a great title. This is a great title. And I like the cover, too. Got our policeman, our cowboy, Texas cowboy sheriff. Great wraparound. You know, it fits with this one, too. They look good on the shelf together. And then book 3, it's orange, so it doesn't quite match, but it looks pretty dope also. And all together, they look great on the shelf. So kudos to the publisher for putting together a nice little trilogy here. So let's get into the story. Starts out in... Well, first of all, if you want to watch my review of The Far Empty, please do watch that one. You know, it's just type in The Far Empty, my last name, into YouTube. The review will magically appear. For the High White Sun, this one starts out with our cast of characters from this book, namely Sheriff Chris Cherry and his deputy, Amy Reynosa. So, however, this one starts out with a prologue that takes place in 1999. So, takes place about 20 years prior to the main story. 1999, there's a Texas Ranger named Bob Ford. He is driving along in the night in his patrol truck, and he comes across a girl who's broken down on the road. Her car's broken down. He happens to recognize her as a stripper from the local strip club. And he's kind of wondering what she's doing out there by herself. She's acting a little fishy, a little squirrely. Well, it's a setup because, you know, she's just out there as bait for the bad guys that are lurking in the bushes that are waiting to ambush Mr. Bob Ford, which they do. He's shot, he's killed, and that starts off our main mystery 20 years prior to... Now we jump to the present, and when we get to the present, we jump right into a shootout and a car chase through the Texas desert, and it's intense, and it's great. We've got Sheriff Chris Cherry, our main guy. Now, Chris Cherry, if you read this book, you know that he was an ex-Texas football player, college football player, got injured, was going to be a superstar, got injured, decided to come back to his hometown of Murphy, Texas, and be a police. In this book, he was police. At the end of this book, I won't say what happens, but he's now sheriff in this book. Anyway, he's got a deputy named Amy Reynosa. Her nickname is Amy. Her real name is America Reynosa. So, America Reynosa... Nick is shortened to Amy Reynosa. Well, it's A-M-E. I don't know how you pronounce A-M-E. America? M? Is it just M? I don't know. A-M-E Reynosa. You guys, when you read it, you can pronounce it however you want. Anyway, car chase, gun battle. We get the bad guy cuffed up, And Amy Reynosa, I mean, he's a bad criminal, right? And Amy Reynosa, whatever, she ends up, in an argument with the criminal and punches. He's already cuffed. He's cuffed, and he's already submitted to the arrest, and she punches his lights out. Boom. Oh, huge, huge, huge break in policy. I mean, that's against policy and procedure. It's also against the law. So now we've got Chris Cherry. He's got this thing where he's like, okay, I'm only 30 years old. Chris Cherry's only 30 years old. He's the sheriff of this department. He's come to realize that his underlings, he's the oldest guy on the force. Everybody that works for him is like younger than him significantly, especially Amy Reynosa. She's no more than like 22 years old. And he's like, gosh, I've got all these young cops that are working for me, and I don't know if they're all obeying the policy, police, and procedures of the department. And he's like, I questions himself as a leader. And he starts reading these leadership books, one of which he reads Blue Bloods by Ed Conlon. And I was like, when I saw that he was reading Blue Bloods, that's one of my favorite, because you know me, I if you've watched my channel for any length of time, you know I've had a career in law enforcement for some time now. One of my favorite books about the subject is Blue Blood by Ed Conlon, and it's one of the books that our author makes mention of, that our main character Chris Cherry is reading. So I just thought I'd bring that up. As when there's little coincidences like that in books, I'll mention it. Whatever. Anyway, things get bad. Things get bad in Murphy, Texas. I mean, all his deputies are youngsters. He's got to learn how to lead them properly. He's dealing with white supremacist gangs. One of the things I love about this book is I've worked with gangs before, and the white supremacist, well, most gangs, but the white supremacist gangs in particular, they tattoo themselves a lot. And the tattoos tell a story of their life. And a lot of them are patches that they earn for doing different acts, different criminal acts. Like if you assault a rival gangster, you get a patch. They call it a patch, but it's a specific tattoo. If you assault a policeman, you get a specific patch. It's a tattoo. I mean, all of these things tell a story of what this gangster's been through, and I really enjoyed the fact that J. Todd Scott sort of got into that. Not only with the white supremacist gangs, which play a big, huge role in this book, but also some of the Spanish gangs that are down there in the southern Texas along the border. Their worship of, I think it's Santa de Muerte, the Maiden of Death, or whatever they call her. But anyway, we've got this book, which is really, it's really part American History X and No Country for Old Men. If you've ever seen those two movies, that's kind of what I compare this to mostly, because it deals with a lot of that southern Texas sort of atmosphere, along with the white supremacy gangs. And we got some bad white supremacy guys. We've got John Wesley Earl. He's a patriarch of this murderous clan down in southern Texas, and he's also, not only that, but he's the general in the Aryan Brotherhood down there, and they're just causing all sorts of havoc down in this part of the country where Chris Cherry is the sheriff of. And then we've got Thurman Flowers, who's a pastor and a white supremacist. He's starting this church called the Church of Purity. This book does a great job of spiraling downward into a lot of these racist sort of clan and cliquish parts of the country, I would say, but Texas specifically. It's a very Texas orientated. Takes place in Murphy, Texas, by the way, down by the river, and where Mexicans typically cross over into America. There's so many themes and so many problems, so many themes running through this book about just the problems that southern Texas, little towns on the border have, especially when it comes to Mexican gangs crossing over and meeting, and then the problems that we have with the white supremacist gangs that are down there, in the intermingle of the two, and how law enforcement has to deal with it. And J. Todd Scott is a former law enforcement officer himself, and it just reads like, these books are so well done. I mean, I've talked about writing mystery novels myself, once I get done with my fantasy series. And I really do look to guys like J. Todd Scott and C.J. Box and Craig Johnson, who does the Logbuyer series, and even a Mark Cameron, who does the Arliss Cutter series that's set up in Alaska. I'm really looking towards those 4 or 5 specific authors when I am kind of deciding how I want to write my mystery novels, because there are a lot of characters in this, and he balances and juggles them so effortlessly. And it's the same with CJ Box and Mark Cameron and these guys. It's just, I want to write mysteries that are exactly like this, that are grim yet full of hope, and just have characters that you root for along the way, and good, bad, ugly, and all in between. This J. Todd Scott is a absolute one of my favorite all-time accidentally stumble across authors in the bookstore. When you're just in the bookstore and you're just kind of wandering about, and then a cover strikes you like this one did, and you pick it up and you take it home and you read it and you're like, oh my God, I've just found one of my favorites. That's what's happened here. And High White Sun keeps the momentum going. I didn't mention much of the plot or anything that's going on. It was more of a character-driven review here, and more of a talking of theme review. But anyway, just another great entry into this small little trilogy. I don't know if he's going to ever revisit these characters after book 3. I have not read book 3 yet, so maybe they all can die in book 3 and it's just done. We'll see. We'll get there, and I'll give it a review. But I give High White Sun another, just like I gave with The Far Empty, another very enthusiastic 10 out of 10. Absolutely almost perfect type of book.